So basically, a very brief background to me. I started an agency, as I said, with Sharma 6 years ago. We worked with Nike when Sharma was working with Nike as well, and have built the business to a global agency now. We have offices in New York. We work pan-European. And I got told off recently when I was talking about this because I called it a happy accident. It wasn't a happy accident. There was a lot of work that went into building those businesses. But what helped was a lot of different people telling me and sharing information, and me never being afraid to ask questions. So a lot of what these processes are also about is not being afraid to change your mind, move really quickly, and be really nimble. So the first thing that I'm going to just quickly give as a background is this idea of failure. So for me, success isn't defined by doing really great things. It's defined by being able to fail and pick yourself back up again. Every big brand in the world isn't just successful all the time, and every person in the world isn't successful all the time, however incredible they might look from the outside. It's a level of perception. Amazon, the best, most amazing brand, the most innovative brand, actually created a phone which bombed, and no one will probably even remember because it was terrible and it was a huge failure. It cost them billions and billions of pounds, and it doesn't matter because they drew a line under it really, really quickly and moved on. So being able to confront your failures and be accountable for what those failures mean within your business is really, really important. But also, again, using these different frameworks to understand why those failures happened and readdressing and saying to yourselves, okay, how can we move on quickly, both emotionally and practically? So that leads nicely on to being nimble. So again, where people kind of make the fatal error of having a very locked down vision of what they want this to be. And Lindsay, who spoke in the last kind of beginning of the session, talked about this idea of thinking about all of your different bits at the bottom but forgetting about your brand. You do need to think about your brand, but you need to be ready and to evolve that. In the same way as she evolved from, wanting to be Oprah Winfrey right the way through to creating kind of agency format, she was able to circumnavigate her own kind of drive and ambition with a need state against what her business propositions were all going to be. And on paper, that might look like a very kind of random mix of things, but when she articulates it and she puts it together, it makes total sense. So being able to be nimble, bouncing back from failure, and being confident in talking about that failure as well, and being really open about it, because I fail every day, whether it be wearing a jumpsuit when you need to go to the toilet really quickly, or walking into a glass door in a meeting room full of people, which is an actual story that happened 2 weeks ago, or locking yourself in a meeting room full of board directors, also another story that actually happened, right the way through to making the wrong hire, or, taking on the wrong client and realizing the relationship isn't working out. You have to be ready and aware of all of those things, but not let them create knocks. Just let them be part of your story, because all of you guys are in the first chapter. You're one of the first 100, but also in a chapter in your stories which are going to evolve over a period of time. So really embracing all of the positives and the negatives. This is my favorite catchphrase, and my team love it. So one of the other reasons for doing things like Business Model Canvas is the reason that failure happens more often than not, and you can't account for everything, is because you don't identify risk. So risks are things that within your business are going to be counterintuitive to what you want to achieve. So that could be the fact that, Brexit happened, awkward, let's not talk about it. It could be things like where, global economies change, where you have, a customer base who actually start growing up. The risks in your business are the biggest part of how you're going to be able to move quickly, but also move on with your next phase of business modeling when you come out of this kind of phase and understand where you go next. So never make assumptions. And if you are making assumptions, it's the biggest signifier that you need to drill down a little bit more into why you're making that assumption. So it's my biggest thing. If I hear in my office ever that someone said, but I assumed that person would be doing their job, it is not my favorite. So in terms of process, one of the other things, I guess, to frame the reason for doing these things is processes shouldn't be there because you've been told to have a process, because the biggest risk to businesses is when you put all of these lovely things in a PowerPoint presentation and it sits in a folder on your desktop and no one ever opens it. That's not a process. That's a pain in the ass. So what you need to do is think about what is the kind of reason and the rationale for creating that output. So anything that you do as a process, your time is all money. So anything you do has to be efficient. So when you do something, you need to know what the output is, and you need to know that it's going to help you move your business forward. So one of the reasons I love Business Canvas is that it's a physical thing. So you don't just kind of think about what you're going to put on a slide and sit in a dark room doing it. You actually write it down. And I would say to a lot of you as well, doing it with other people. Don't just do it on your own. I think one of the other things that can become very isolating when you're running a business is having all these great ideas in your head and not asking and talking to other people about it. We're all human beings. Interaction's a thing. It's great. So again, just understanding what your outcomes of any process are. And for this, I think it's a really helpful tool to help segment where your businesses can go and what that business model could look like. So, not to sound like a salesperson for Business Model Canvas, but it's very simple, it's very effective, and it's very nimble. It does have a very kind of simple way of operating. And again, you can spend a day doing it with 5 million post-it notes, which is arguably what I do force my team to do every so often, and spend a whole day just working out each section and deep diving into it. Obviously, in this session, you have 40 minutes. So try to really think about how you prioritize. I know I've met some of you guys before, and we were doing the user experience canvas. Try and think about 3 things. So the way your brain operates is it processes information in 3s. And so, nice fact. So essentially, when you're trying to optimize on time and you know that you want to have an output of something, try and think about things in 3s. So each of the sections, if you only populate 3 things, that's actually winning. So, vision. So your vision is your heart of your business. It doesn't tend to change. It can, but it doesn't tend to change. I didn't want to be too leading in the vision workshop that I hosted, but the vision for Scene and my business is an agency for people, by people, with purpose. So essentially, that vision is at the heart of everything that we evolve. So whether it be starting new agencies, which I do love to do, whether it be content divisions, whether it be influencer agencies, but always having the idea of people-centric approaches is at the heart of everything that I do. I'm a bit obsessed with people in a very creepy way. So what Model does is it's your brain. So if you think about this in context, you've got the heart of your business, which stays the same, but your brain evolves, it changes. And your brain has a left side and it has a right side. And in terms of what that looks like from a science perspective, you have your left side, which is logic, and the right side, which is emotion. So essentially what you're doing, if you think about the business model canvas, and I'll obviously show you an example of what it is, you think about the idea of effectiveness and also value. So when you're thinking about how you're populating this, the left side of your canvas should be about effectiveness, and the right side of the canvas should be about value. This is what it looks like. That's a really blurry image, so actually not that helpful. So basically, what I'm just going to do now is very quickly talk you through each of the sections. But again, as I said at the beginning, try and make sure when you're populating it, you're not thinking about all of the different things you could do. Try and refine it down to 3 things per section. So rather than take you through a scene example of how we do this, I thought I would take you through an example from a brand that we all know, which is the iPod. So this is a slightly clearer image, but it gives you an example of what the iPod business canvas could look like. So as you can see, we're not trying to create an entire business strategy or a business plan. It's about compartmentalizing the information that you all have about your businesses into clear sections and quadrants so that you can make sense of them and how they all come together. So your key partners, which is this section here. So from an iPod perspective, they're key partners. Well, obviously the manufacturer, so the actual equipment and the kind of OEMs. The record companies, obviously, very important when you're dealing with the music industry. Your key activities from an iPod perspective are your hardware design, your marketing. So basically, how are you going to get your business from A to B? So what are the key things in terms of the activities you need to engage with to take yourself from 0 to hero? There will be some things that bridge the gap. So in terms of partners and kind of activities, the kind of key thing for iPod is people. Very important for any business. I would argue that anyone in this room that doesn't have people on their business canvas is probably missing a trick. Content and agreements. And then also just looking at kind of the other attributes that you need to think about in terms of key resources, so again, where things are clicking over, You've got key resources, which obviously iPod came from the Apple brand. So as a brand, Apple has a huge amount of heritage. Everyone understands what it is. So what do you guys have within your businesses, which are not just kind of mentors, but resources at your disposal? It might be that you've been in, the film industry for 10 years and you saw a gap in the market. What are the resources that are going to help you take your business to the next stage? Value propositions. So what is your USP? So most businesses try and have a key kind of area that they're owning in a market. Sometimes business models are literally based on replicating someone else's model, but for cheaper. But what is your USP and where can that sit? So again, when thinking about the left and the right side of your brain, this is where the bridge starts to come from your kind of evaluation piece right the way through to your value. So you've then got your cost structures. Okay, so in terms of the cost structures, really super simple. What does your business need to pay for? So one of the challenges with an agency is this is a very expensive thing. So again, if you have kind of digital businesses, people might be on your cost structures, but there might be other things in terms of supply chains. There might be things around productization. So just thinking about what are the things that you are going to have to pay for as a business to make sure that you've identified them and you know exactly where they're going to be coming from, because they'll help you build a more robust system and back end as well. So for iPod, they also obviously have marketing and sales and manufacturing. So revenue streams are obviously very important because, as I think right at the beginning of the day, someone said, your business, I think it was Layla, your business is only as good as what someone's willing to pay you to do it. So I started an agency, and obviously an agency needs clients. So we were very lucky. We had a very clear gap in the market. We had a very clear proposition, and we've worked with HBO, with Microsoft, Facebook, and Instagram, some of the biggest brands in the world. But we also need to always understand where that revenue is coming from and actually be aware of where it potentially could be a risk as well. So one of the areas that I think is really, really important when you're thinking about what your revenue streams could be is what would be the risk to those revenue streams if one of them dropped out or if all of them dropped out. Customer segmentation. So this is my favorite one. So basically, the iPod's for everyone. My favorite client brief, which is most client briefs, is we want to target the world. Okay, great. But my advice to you guys is try and think about who your customer segmentation is. So I do a lot of customer segmentation work, and I do a lot of stuff around, because I'm a little obsessed with people, around psychometrics. So the emotional triggers, like who your customer is from an age, a gender, and a kind of location perspective are all really interesting things. But actually, who do you want to talk to? What's the personality of that person? Because if you can understand that your customer is a human being and a person, you're going to be able to tap into their kind of psyche, get under the skin of what's going to motivate them to buy your product, engage with your service, or potentially, be a partner potentially down the line. Customer relationships. So how you're defining your customer relationship. So as I said at the beginning, the vision for me with Scene is all around people-centric approach. So all of our clients have very personal relationships to the point we've become very good friends often, which is great for my networking. But also understanding what is going to be your kind of signifier as those customer relationships. So with Sharma, obviously in terms of WAR, very close-knit relationship with all the WAR girls. Like Sharmadine actually contacts them and stays in touch with them and has this kind of very simple dialogue. It's kind of mad and amazing. For me, it's about kind of, how we're going to be able to build brand relationships with the people that work in the brand. So again, how are you going about building those relationships? What are you going to stand for with that kind of relationship? So channels. So for an iPod, the key channels are Apple stores, obviously, retail, and obviously apple.com. So if you have a digital business, where is your app going to be hosted? Is it going to be Android or is it going to be iOS and Android? What are the things that you're thinking about in terms of the channels that you're creating for retail? But also, I think to think about in this section is the channels for communication as well. So within your model, how are you telling people about your brand? I was very lucky in that a lot of the promotion around the agency and how we've kind of grown has been word of mouth. That's arguably not the best model for promotion and certainly works very well from an agency perspective, but it doesn't necessarily work as well for a product proposition. So again, just thinking about how people are promoting your business, where they're going to be talking about it. So what these different sections are are building blocks for you to be able to understand how all these different things fit together. But also, again, as I said at the beginning, you have all this information in your head. You just need to know from the information you've got what's going to be the most important, most relevant, and where it needs to sit. And when that's on a piece of paper in front of you, things start to come together. And I think when you kind of think about the user experience, the business model, your vision, and all these different components, what you do and what you decide to do with those bits of paper and take them away and put them maybe into a PowerPoint presentation or just stick them on your wall is going to help you motivate and drive whatever your next phase of business is.